Okay, we're back. Coeur to the West. Really wanted to do a video series that addressed some of the issues of living in North Idaho. So we're going to get started with property access. We're going to talk about roads. We're going to talk about clearing land. We're going to talk about some of the things that you should consider before buying a piece of property, about where to put your house and how you're going to get to your house. But other things to think about is who else and what else can get to that property. For example, does the county come by and plow the snow? Can fire trucks, EMS vehicles get to your property? Those are some of the things we're going to talk about today. Property access. So I want to talk about, in North Idaho, we've got severe weather, and that means snow, rain, those types of things. There's hundreds and hundreds of miles. So you might have a county road in front of your house, but it might take a day or two before they come by and get things cleaned up. Or they could come by early one morning, get the snow cleaned off, and it could keep snowing hard while they're off cleaning up other stuff, and you get an additional 6 or 8 inches. It may be a while before they get back there. It's something to consider. The other is where your access to your property is, whether that's your driveway access or it's a private road that goes down a half a mile to where your property is. The county may block that entrance with snow as they come by. And it may be on you and your neighbors to clean out that snow and to plow from your property out to that county maintained road. Something to consider. With the weather that we get, you're going to have a lot of the possibilities of washouts. I've seen rainstorms come in, wash out a creek, which then washes out a road because a culvert got plugged or whatever happened. So something to consider also is how many bridges, how many culverts, how many streams do you have to cross to get to your property, and what is the likelihood that those might become impassable in a severe weather event. So these are things to look at as you're buying property is what's the access like as far as roads and bridges and streams and those types of things. Something to look at. The other is, if you have kids, if you're thinking about putting kids on school buses or need access to those school buses, where is that school bus at in relationship to your property? We had some property in eastern Idaho, and I would have to drive 20 minutes to a bus stop, and then those kids would have to go an hour on a bus in order to get to the school. That starts to add up when you start thinking about an hour and a half in the morning and an hour and a half in the afternoon. That was a great piece of property, great views, loved that property, but having kids and living there made things very difficult. We were spending more time shuttling kids, and so it really became, do we want to homeschool? Because it would save us hours, hundreds of hours a month, really, in total time, if we could homeschool. So those are things that you start to really consider. I think that's why we see a lot more folks that are homeschooling in these rural environments, is because traveling back and forth, getting kids either to the school buses or into town, into school, takes so much time, so much effort. And there's so many days where maybe you just can't get down the road and get those kids to school. So access for school for kids may be different than it is for retired folks that can stay home, weather the storm, eat out of their pantry for a few days, and let that storm clear out, and then go out and plow snow and open up the access. So just something to be thinking about. Again, here it is summertime, lots of dust. Dust is an issue for a lot of folks, especially if you buy a place that has a road in front of it. People traveling back and forth across that road, it may be dusty in front of your house, or it's just something to consider is, what's the road quality close to your property. If it's just a dirt road that is dusty or a gravel road that gets a lot of use, maybe you want to consider a property that's off of that road so that you're not having to eat dust every time somebody drives by your house. I think that's why end of the road privacy is really popular for folks. They want to be at the end of the road where they don't have people driving by their properties as often. Something to consider. Then we talk about mail. A lot of people just have a P.O. box in town, and they go into town, they get their groceries, they get their mail, because mail delivery may not bring the mail right to your house. Some of those places, they have community mailboxes, and the Postal Service will deliver to that box that's at the end of that road. But your mail access, a lot of those don't take packages, or there's a risk that your package might end up being out in the weather because they don't deliver up to your house. That's something to look into, something to consider is where do I get my mail if I buy this particular property? There's newspaper delivery. I don't know that this book might be a little bit old, that they talk about mail delivery. I think most of us are going to be getting our Amazon packages, or we'll be getting our news online. Internet's going to be more important for most of us than getting our newspaper delivered. The other is to think about commute times. You might be, hey, summertime, I can drive over there. I can get to and from my house in 10 minutes or 15 minutes. In the wintertime, with snowy roads, and if it's muddy, if it's slippery, if you have to wait on the plow, it might be that your commute time could double. So something to think about is that access in how much time it's going to take to travel, but then how that travel time might change depending on the time of the year. So if you don't want long commute times, you might want to be closer to town, or you want to be on main roads that get plowed sooner, that are easier to access, that have more cars on them, and that will give you faster commute time. So commute time is something to consider as well. So those are some of the property access items listed in the Bonner County Code of the West book. Now we've started thinking about our property and buying that property and how we're going to get into that property, and some of the things that may say yes, we should buy that property, or no, we shouldn't. The other is going to be, once we get to our property, how do we get into our home site? And there's some things that I want to talk about as far as the topography of the property that you're buying. Now, if you're buying a 10-acre flat hayfield, that's going to be great. But you may not get the privacy that maybe you want. As far as here, you can see there's lots of trees, but the trees require pulling a lot of stumps and cleaning things up, and there's a lot of slash, and it's a lot of additional work. But once you get it cleaned up, you've got trees around you, you've got the privacy, and you've got a road cleared into your property. So as you're looking at property, if you have, say, 2 10-acre parcels, one has the driveway in and the gravel's in and the culvert is in the ditch at the end of the driveway, and the home site is cleared out, and they've cleared out a 1/4 acre or a 1/2 acre or whatever it might be that they've kind of opened up. That's a lot of value added to that property, especially if you're looking at a similar parcel and you're thinking, man, there's no driveway, there's no gravel, they haven't cleared the home site. If they're both the same price, I would encourage you to buy the one that has that driveway and that home site already cleared. There's a massive amount of work that goes into pulling stumps and hauling rock and getting that done. And I don't think that most people think about that. They don't consider that, wow, there might be $10,000 or $15,000 worth of work here, and they think, oh, we'll just clear a road, no big deal. As soon as that equipment comes in and starts going to work, it starts to get expensive very quickly. So think about that as some of those terrain features. Also, if the road across your property is steep, it might mean that the distance isn't a straight line between point A and point B. It may have to be a bit of a switchback to get over a hill or to get down to the property, wherever it might be. But you need to think about the the terrain and how that's going to affect where you can drive and where you can put your driveways and your roads into a property. A lot of properties that are on steeper slopes have great views, absolutely fantastic views, but it's going to require a lot more road and a lot more excavation for home site, and so those views come at a cost. And so it's balancing, do I want privacy, do I want views, what's it going to cost in relationship to my driveway, to clearing my home site, to getting access into the property that is access that we can sustain year round, whether it's keeping gravel on the road in the summertime and keeping it graded so that it's not washing out with the rain come fall, and that we have enough room and the right equipment to keep the snow off of it so that we can get in and out in the wintertime. Because even on a 5-acre parcel, there's going to be a substantial amount of driveway. If you consider that a 5-acre parcel might be 330 by 660, 330 feet by 660 feet, if you put your house in the middle, it's quite a driveway, at least 100 feet or maybe 200 feet, depending. If you put your house in the middle there somewhere that you've got to keep cleared, you've got to build that driveway, and then you've got to maintain it over the years. So something to think about is, we've got our property, how do we get from the road into our house? That driveway road is something else to consider as we talk about access to the property. Most people think, hey, if I can just get to the edge of the property, well, I'm good. Well, you are, but you might be out on the edge of the road that is dusty because of all the traffic, and maybe it wouldn't give you the privacy that you want if your house was further in. So I want to get you thinking about this and considering this as you're looking at property. If you're looking at moving to North Idaho, these are some of the access considerations, some of the points that I think that people miss. They get here, they get excited about being here, it's summertime, it's beautiful, it's green, and there's this emotion attached to buying property and being here. And then they buy it, and then the reality sets in of, wow, we need a place to put a house, we need a place to put a shop, we want a place for a barn, we need a road, we got to talk about bringing in utilities of some sort, or even if we're not bringing in power or phone or whatever it might be, we still got to talk about drilling a well, which means getting a well driller in, and he's going to have a large truck that's going to require a pretty decent road to be able to get that well driller in. We're going to have to think about getting power, and how far is that power? Man, we've got to run that power 600 feet. We're going to need a transformer. What's that going to cost? So buying that property is the start of the process. But there's a lot of choices to be made in there, and a lot of those choices can be eliminated by just buying the right property that's what you want and may be somewhat developed. And when I say developed, I mean not just subdivided from a 10 into a 5. I mean the driveway's in, the power's there, somebody already drilled a well, they've cleared the home site, and we've got access into the property, not only for us to build a house, but for us to get the proper equipment in there, like a cement truck, like a well driller, a drilling rig in there to drill a well. And we've got the space to bring the power down the road or overhead, depending on how you do it. So Code of the West has some really good information in it. But I want you to start thinking about how you get to the property, and once you're to the property, how you get to your home, and then how you maintain that open access as the seasons change, as they're going to. So that is Code of the West access. Start thinking about those things we're going to be talking about in future videos. We're going to get into the utilities. I'm going to talk a lot about power. I'm going to talk a lot about septic and things to consider on your property. And we're going to start talking about wells and try to give you some good information about wells and things to consider with well pumps and power and well logs and soil types, and we'll get into that. So we'll cover power, we'll cover the sewer, We'll cover the water, which will be wells. We'll talk a little about some of the local water associations, because there are local water associations and there might be a possibility of buying a hookup and bringing that water in. That'll be something to consider. We'll talk about those utilities. I think I'll break those down and we'll do each in an individual video. Try to get into the weeds a little bit, be very specific about some of those different options and what to consider in North Idaho. Some of this is going to relate across the board to other states, but I'm familiar with this, having spent a bunch of time in this, doing this not only for myself on our property, but then doing it for a lot of other people. And so I want to share that information with you. So as this video series goes along, we'll try to capture a lot of that experience, a lot of those pitfalls that I've seen other people and myself certainly make. As we'll help you to avoid those pitfalls and save you from making those mistakes. So look forward to other videos as we go along in this series. There is a lot of good information. We'll get into services. That'll be utilities. We'll talk about the property. We're going to talk about property taxes. We're going to talk about some of the agricultural exemptions. We'll talk about timber exemptions, some of those things that you should consider as you're looking at property and property size. For example, if you have a 5-acre piece, you may not qualify for ag or forestry exemptions, but if you have a 10-acre piece, you might qualify for it. And some of those things to consider as you're looking at property. We'll talk about easements and right-of-ways. Those things are in here. We'll dig into the weather a little bit. I get a lot of calls about, hey, I've got a driveway and I want to buy a piece of equipment. Should I get a tractor? Should I get a skid loader? What's the right piece of equipment for what I'm doing? And so we'll dig into some of that. We've got, as mentioned before, we'll get into some of the agriculture issues, farming and ranching, some of those things. And then we'll do a whole video on some of the other agencies that you're going to have to interact with. For example, the Army Corps of Engineers on wetlands and some of those things. There might be floodway, floodplain that we may have to interact with FEMA. There's obviously the state, Department of Environmental Quality. There's Panhandle Health District and Septic, and some of these other agencies will try to share some information about where you can reach out and gather more information as it relates to your property. So look forward to that. Today was all about access, and I hope that was helpful. I hope it's got you thinking as you may be looking for property, or maybe you've already purchased. Some things to consider, and I hope that we'll catch you on the next video. I've been really happy with the response on this series. It seems like this is something that people are interested in. So continue to put information in the comments. Tell me more about what you want to hear, what's important to you, what you want us to talk more about. This really needs to be a roundtable discussion, because I have my point of view based on my perspective, but I would love to be able to share with people watching the videos, maybe those that are looking at property and what they're seeing, what they're thinking, what has been helpful, what's useful, and what maybe isn't. I had some people reach out and they said, we've been looking for property on Zillow and we found a piece of property that we were absolutely in love with. Turns out that property had sold 4 months ago. And so we did all this research and looked into the property, and then we said, yeah, it works for us. And we reached out to the realtor, and that property was already gone. And so the property that's out there listed on some of those secondary sites like realtor.com or Zillow may not be current and up to date, especially as fast as real estate is moving in this current market. That might give you an indication of pricing and what's out there and those types of things. But it may be better to start with a realtor, and they can give you current, this is available right now. Oh, nope, sorry, it's got an offer on it. Oh, nope, that's sold. Oh, hey, this just came on the market. And there would be a real advantage in this current market, as fast as it's moving, to, sorry about that. Hey, sir. Yeah, sorry, I was working on a YouTube video and I was running behind, but I was going to wrap this up and then head your way. Okay, see you in a little bit. Bye. So, finding a good realtor, like we use Century 21, Chris Neu. I really like Chris. I think he's awesome. He's grown up here. He knows this place. He's done real estate for a long, long time. He's got a world of experience that is hard to replicate with other realtors because of growing up here, knowing this place, knowing the area, being able to speak to terrain features, to speak to those weather events, to see what types of driveways work with what kind of rock on it. You know, is this a good place for a home site, or is this going to get wet in a really wet spring? Those types of things. Chris can read the terrain and understand the land better than a lot of realtors that maybe don't have a lifetime of living here. And he's done a lot of residential, but he's also done a lot of development work, and so he can speak to kind of both sides of the spectrum. So Chris is the guy that we use for our project. I can't say enough good about Chris Neu. You can look him up, Google him on online, and you know, if you're looking for property, in North Idaho, I would highly recommend that you call Chris Neu. And I'll put his number out there. I'll put his number down in the description, and hopefully that'll piss him off, because my hope is that every single one of you will call him and say, Chris, find me a piece of land, or Chris, find me a house. And I'd love to have Chris call me and say, why did you give them my number? And it's because I think Chris is the guy you should work with. If you're coming this way, if you're moving to North Idaho, you should be talking to Chris. There's a lot of realtors out there. They are not all the same. Chris is the one that you want to work with for sure. So thanks again, and we'll catch you on the next video.